The chandeliers of the Castellano estate blazed like captured sunlight, casting a golden glow over 100 of the city's most powerful and most corrupt. It was my son's 6th birthday, a celebration of legacy, a display of the empire that bore my name. To them, I was just a smiling host, a patron of the arts, a philanthropist. They didn't see the steel beneath the silk of my suit, the predator's patience behind my eyes. I was Don Castellano, the undisputed king of this underground kingdom. And as the string quartet played a waltz and the champagne flowed, my kingdom was a fortress. Or so I believed. The crowd blurred around me, smiling, sycophantic, treacherous. My wife, Elena, a vision in sapphire, played the perfect consort. My brother, Marco, toasted my health with a glass of 20-year-old scotch. All perfect, all a lie. I held my son, Leo, on my hip, his small hand clutching a toy car, his eyes wide with the simple joy that only a child can possess. He was my heart, my anchor in this world of sharks. "Daddy, look," he giggled, pointing at a magician who was making doves appear from his hat. The guests applauded. The camera flashes sparkled. It was a scene of opulent perfection, a scene I had curated with the precision of a master strategist. But somewhere in the periphery of my awareness, something felt off. A discordant note in the symphony of my control. It was the housekeeper's child, a boy named Elias, barely 3 years old. He was standing behind a marble pillar, his eyes fixed not on the magic, but on me. His mother, Clara, a quiet, loyal woman who had served my family for a decade, was trying to coax him back to the servants' quarters. But Elias wouldn't move. He was a shy, unassuming child, always in the background, a soft shadow in the corners of my home. I had often seen him playing in the kitchen, his tiny fingers tracing patterns in spilled flour. He was invisible to the glittering guests, just another piece of the furniture that made their world comfortable. But now, his gaze was piercing, filled with a fear so primal it sent a chill down my spine, despite the warmth of the room. It was the kind of terror that had no name, the kind that preceded a scream. In that world of music and laughter, his small, silent panic was an island of pure dread. Then he did something that caught my attention like a bolt of lightning. He stepped from behind the pillar and started walking towards me. He passed through the forest of silk skirts and tailored trousers, unhindered by the opulence, his small feet silent on the marble floor. A few guests tittered in amusement, watching the maid's child wander into the lion's den. His mother's face went white. She rushed after him, her frantic apologies a frantic whisper. "Senior Castellano, I'm so sorry." "He gets confused. He's just tired. I'll take him now," she stammered, her hands reaching out to scoop him up. But I raised my hand, a calm gesture that silenced her instantly. The other guests felt the shift in the air, the sudden, electric charge of their Don's attention. They stopped their idle chatter and turned to look. The music seemed to falter. Elias reached me, his small hands trembling. He looked up, past my son, past the dazzling jewels, and fixed his eyes on mine. In a voice so fragile it was almost lost in the grandeur, he whispered a single, chilling word. "Boom." The world stopped. The sound of his small voice echoed in my ears, louder than any gunshot. My heart, a steady, cold metronome, skipped a beat. I looked at his face, at the pale terror in his eyes. He wasn't just a frightened child. He was a warning. From behind me, Marco let out a short, dismissive laugh. "Kids," he chuckled, shaking his head. "Always looking for attention. Come on, brother. It's time for the cake." But I didn't hear him. I was already elsewhere. My mind, a tactical masterpiece of New York's underworld, was scanning every frame of the past hour. The new catering staff I'd never met. The electrical panel that had been serviced this morning. The subtle, almost imperceptible flicker of a smile on my brother's face. The pieces of the puzzle were clicking together, and the picture they were forming was one of total annihilation. My fortresses had been breached, not by an army, but by a serpent from within. And the only person who had warned me was a 3-year-old boy who saw the danger that no one else could. The party dissolved into a controlled chaos. I didn't announce an evacuation. That would have triggered a panic and played right into my enemy's hands. With a smile as cold as a winter grave, I made a brief announcement about a minor gas leak in the kitchen, my voice smooth and reassuring as I asked my guests to calmly proceed to the garden. My security detail, the most loyal of my men, moved with silent efficiency, ushering the billionaires and politicians out of the ballroom. My son Leo was in my arms, Elena by my side, her face a mask of confusion. "What's going on, Enzo?" she whispered, her fingers digging into my arm. "Do exactly as I say," I commanded, my voice brooking no argument. "Take Leo and go to the safe room. Don't open the door for anyone but me." The safe room was a titanium bunker hidden beneath the east wing, a fortress within the fortress. I didn't wait to see her go. My trust in her was absolute, but the betrayal of someone close had left a festering wound I couldn't ignore. I had to find the source of the threat.
The bomb.
Or bombs. I had to find Clara and Elias. I found them in a panic, cornered in a service hallway by two of my men I thought I could trust. Clara was shielding her son, her body a desperate barrier. They were laughing, mocking her, calling her a fool for raising a little monster who would ruin the party. "Your little freak almost got everyone killed with his stupid games," one of them sneered, grabbing Clara's arm. "We could have been rich, you stupid woman."
Rich.
"But you had to ruin it all by letting him get away." "Let them go," I said, my voice slicing through the hallway like a shard of glass. My presence was like a thunderclap, instantly shattering their confidence. They dropped Clara's arm as if burned, their faces turning ashen. They knew they were dead. "Don Castellano," one stammered. "It's not what it looks like. Save it for your prayers," I said, my eyes pinning them in place. Two more of my loyal men appeared from the shadows. "Take them to the basement. And make sure they are comfortable. I'll have questions for them later." I turned to Clara, whose hands were trembling as she clutched Elias. "He was trying to tell you something before," he said, boom. "It's a word he heard. He's been repeating it all day." "What word?" I asked, my voice gentle but urgent. I knelt to Elias's level, looking into his eyes. "Elias, look at me. What did you hear?" The little boy whimpered, hiding his face in his mother's apron. He was terrified, his small body shaking. The world of power I inhabited had broken this innocent, and a cold fury settled in my bones. "No more," Clara begged. "Please, he's just a baby. He doesn't know what he's saying. He must have just heard a word from the television." "There are no televisions in the kitchen," I said, my tone hardening as I realized how much they were trying to protect themselves from the truth. "He heard something. I need to know what." Slowly, as if coaxing a wild animal, I asked Clara to recount Elias's day. "He was playing in the kitchen. The caterers were in the basement storerooms," she stammered. "He must have snuck down there." The basement. The electrical panel. The service entrance that Marco, my own brother, had insisted on renovating to the puzzle was suddenly complete. A squad of assassins disguised as caterers, smuggling in an explosive device through the basement. I didn't need Elias to draw me a map. I already knew. I also knew that the bomb was likely on a timer, meant to detonate during the cake-cutting ceremony, when my entire family was clustered together. But I had a different timeline now. I had a 3-year-old's whisper. I left my men to secure the perimeter. I had a mole to smoke out. I started walking toward the grand staircase, my footsteps heavy and deliberate. The house was quiet now, the only sound the distant wail of a police siren, a sound I had ordered my security team to intercept. The search for the bomb was now a silent hunt, and the prey was my brother. Marco was in the library, a glass of scotch in his hand, his face a mask of concern. The moment I entered, his expression shifted to one of practiced sympathy. "Enzo, my God, what's happening?" The gas leak. I was so worried. "What can I do?" He was my brother. We had grown up in the streets, fought side by side to build our empire. He had been my shadow, my lieutenant, the man I trusted with my life. The man who was now trying to end it. I could see the lie in his eyes, the flicker of panic he was trying to suppress. I had been a fool, a sentimental fool who had let love blind him to ambition, There is no gas leak, Marco, I said, my voice low and even. I closed the door, the soft click of the lock sounding like the snap of a trap. There are bombs. In the basement. Set to go off in 15 minutes. The color drained from his face. Bombs, that's impossible. I inspected the basement myself this morning. It was all clear. Did you? I asked, moving closer. Or did you help them? The air in the room grew thick, heavy with dread. The caterers who were here today. The ones you personally approved. I've had my men check their credentials. They're ghosts, Marco. Dead men who don't exist. They have their orders from someone who wanted me dead. This is insane. You're accusing me of wanting to kill my own brother. My own family, he shouted, his voice cracking. He was a good actor, I'd give him that. He was leaning into the role of the wronged, innocent sibling. Then why was the bomb set to go off during the toast, Marco? I pressed. The toast you insisted on making. The toast that would have had my whole family, my wife, my son, all in one convenient place. Your employer, the Moretti family, what did they promise you? A piece of my territory, a seat at their table. I don't know what you're talking about, he sputtered, his protestations weak and transparent. He was a cornered rat, and cornered rats are the most dangerous kind. Suddenly, his demeanor shifted. The mask of the panicked brother dropped, and the monster beneath was revealed. His eyes hardened into chips of ice. You always were a self-righteous fool, he spat, his voice cold and devoid of all emotion. You made me your servant, your little brother, your errand boy. While you were the king, I was only the court jester. You think I would have settled for a peace I was promised at all? The entire empire, your wife, your son, your seat of power, it was all supposed to be mine. The bombs will go off whether you disarm them or not, Marco sneered. There are more than you can find. There is a secondary timer linked to the primary one. The explosion will be spectacular. The Castellano Empire dies in a ball of fire, and the Morettis will take the city. I had expected this. The betrayal wasn't a surprise anymore. But the callous mention of my son, Leo, ignited a furnace of rage in my soul. My voice dropped to a whisper, a sound more terrifying than any shout. Where is the secondary trigger, Marco? I'll never tell you, he laughed, a hollow, desperate sound. Your son is as good as dead. My only regret is that I won't get to see the look on your face when you watch the building collapse on top of him. That was the final confession. It was all I needed. I didn't hit him. I didn't draw a weapon. I simply walked to the phone on his desk and pressed a button. The floor beneath his chair opened without a sound. A hidden trap door I had installed myself, leading to a special room. A room designed for moments just like this. A room with no doors and no windows. Marco screamed as he fell into the darkness. The fake wall slid back into place. His screams were swallowed by the soundproofed concrete. I had no time for him now. I had a bomb to defuse and a son to save. The emotional justice was in knowing he would be in that darkness to contemplate his betrayal until I returned. The clock was ticking. I could feel its relentless pulse in my veins as I ran to the basement, my men a silent phalanx behind me. The security detail had found the bomb. It was attached to the main support pillar, a complex mess of wires and C4 that would turn the entire east wing into rubble. It was the work of a professional, a ghost who was as good as his reputation. Don Castellano, my head of security, a grizzled veteran named Mancini, said, his face grim. This isn't a simple device. It's a two-stage trigger. The primary timer is on a loop. The secondary is voice-activated. A dead man's switch, I muttered, my mind racing. The secondary trigger wasn't linked to a timer, it was linked to the bomber. If the bomber didn't confirm the detonation by a certain time, the device would go off on its own. Is it a trap? Mancini asked. It's a failsafe. I corrected, a cold certainty settling in my chest. It's Marco's. He planned to be here to give the order. He's the voice. Marco was the secondary trigger. He was supposed to be in the library giving the order for the bomb to go off. But Marco was currently in a basement of his own, a pit of silence. I had disrupted his plan. The dead man's switch was now a ticking clock without a key. We need to find the wire that connects to his voice print, I said, my gaze sweeping over the intricate device. The wires were bundled together, a nest of red and black snakes. And we need to bypass it. The seconds stretched into hours. The experts I had on my payroll were a highly trained team, but this was a masterpiece of destruction. They worked with sweat beading on their brows, their breaths held in a collective gasp of concentration. The entire family was counting on them. I thought of Leo's small, trusting hand in mine. I thought of Clara, who had been so terrified for her son's safety. And I thought of Elias, the little boy who had looked at the glittering party and seen only death. "I found it," Mancini whispered, his voice tense. "The secondary wire. But if I cut the wrong one, the whole thing goes up." There was a moment of perfect silence. The air was thick with the scent of gunpowder and fear. This was the moment of truth. My entire life had been about strategy and foresight. Now, I was relying on the skill of a trusted man and a second of calculated bravery. "Do it," I said. He snipped the wire. A small, red light on the device flickered and died. The bomb was silenced. My men let out a collective sigh of relief, but I was far from done. "I want you to secure the site," I ordered. "I want a full sweep of the grounds. Find the remaining assassins. No survivors. And bring me the Moretus head of operations. I want him alive, but he doesn't need to be in one piece." The hunt was just beginning. Marco had been a symptom. The Moretus, a rival family, were the disease. They had tried to destroy me in my own home, in front of my wife and my son. They had used my brother as their puppet. The insult was 1,000 times greater than a simple assassination attempt. It was a war crime in the underworld, and I was now a one-man army. I made my way back through the silent corridors, my footsteps echoing against the marble floors. The estate that had been a fortress of joy just hours ago now felt like a tomb. Every shadow seemed to move. Every whisper of the wind carried a new threat. But I had no time for fear. Fear was a luxury I could not afford. I had a family to protect and an empire to avenge. The night air hit my face as I stepped outside, the cool breeze doing little to calm the fire burning in my chest. My men were already fanning out across the grounds, their flashlights cutting through the darkness like swords. Somewhere out there, the remaining members of the assassination squad were hiding, waiting for their moment to strike again. But they had made a fatal mistake. They had missed. And now they would learn what happens to those who fail to kill Don Castellano. I lit a cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating my face. In the distance, I could hear the faint sound of sirens, but they were growing fainter. My men had done their job well. The perimeter was secure. Now came the hard part. The reckoning. The safe room door opened to reveal Elena, her face pale with fear, and Leo, fast asleep in her arms. The sight of them, alive and unharmed, was a balm to my soul, a sliver of light in the encroaching darkness. I crushed them both in a fierce embrace. "It's over," I whispered into her hair. "We're safe. The monster is gone." But I was lying. The monster was still out there, wearing 1,000 different faces. I kissed Leo's forehead and laid him down on the plush bed. "Get some rest," I told Elena. "I have to finish this." She didn't ask where I was going. She knew better. She simply nodded, her eyes filled with a steely resolve that matched my own. She was my wife, my queen, and she was as ruthless as I was when it came to protecting her family. That I made my way to the underground garage. The man I was looking for was awaiting me in a dimly lit room, stripped to his waist, his body a canvas of recent violence. He was the Moretti's chief enforcer, a man named Bruno. He was arrogant, even in defeat, sure that his family would avenge him. "Do you know who I am?" I asked, my voice a low growl. "Castellano," he spat, blood trickling from a cut on his lip. "You're a dead man walking. The Moretus will tear you apart. You're nothing without your brother." I laughed, a cold, mirthless sound. "My brother is a traitor who's currently enjoying his new accommodations. I have no use for him, so that just leaves us." I leaned in close, my face inches from his. The scent of his fear was intoxicating. "Here's the deal. You're going to tell me everything I need to know about the Moretti operation. Their safe houses, their shipment routes, their weaknesses. You're going to give me a roadmap to their destruction. And in return, I won't let my men chop you into little pieces and feed you to the hounds in the garden. He was defiant. He spat in my face. You're a dead man. You're all dead. I wiped the spittle from my cheek with a calm, measured motion. You think I'm bluffing? I don't bluff. I offer you a choice between a swift death and a very, very long one. It's your only chance to save yourself. I watched his resolve crumble. The sheer confidence, the absolute certainty in my voice, was a weapon more devastating than any gun. I didn't need a confession. I needed a tool. An unwilling asset to use in the war to come. I held out my hand. Tell me what I want to know, and I will let you live. You will walk out of here a free man. You will have a new life, far from the city. But you'll also have a debt to pay. What debt? He asked, his voice a hoarse whisper. You'll be my messenger. You'll deliver a message to the Morettis from me. A message that they will understand. A message of absolute, irreversible war. Bruno's eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape that didn't exist. His pride warred with his survival instinct, and I could see the exact moment when fear won. His shoulders sagged, the fight draining out of him like air from a punctured lung. Tell me, I said again, my voice soft but edged with steel. And so he did. He talked for hours, spilling every secret, every weakness, every hidden asset of the Moretti Empire. He gave me names, dates, locations. He gave me the keys to their kingdom. And when he was finished, I kept my promise. I let him go, but not before I had one of my men plant a tracker in the hollow of his shoe. He would lead me to the Morettis' most secure hiding place. He would be my unwitting guide into the heart of their fortress. I watched him disappear into the night, a broken man carrying a message he didn't fully understand. The war had begun, and I intended to win it before the sun rose again. My family was safe for now, but the Morettis would never stop. They would keep coming until I was dead, or until I had wiped them from the face of the earth. I knew which outcome I preferred. The rest of the night was a blur of planning and preparation. Maps were spread across the table. Weapons were cleaned and loaded. Men were briefed and dispatched. By dawn, I had a strategy in place, a web of coordinated strikes that would hit the Morettis from every angle. Their money, their supply lines, their leadership, all of it would be targeted simultaneously. I stood at the window, watching the first rays of sunlight creep over the city skyline. New York was waking up, oblivious to the war that was about to erupt in its shadows. I thought of Leo, sleeping peacefully in his bed. I thought of Elena, standing by my side through every storm. And I thought of Clara and Elias, the quiet heroes who had saved us all. This was for them. Every move I made from this moment on was for them. The Morettis had made a terrible mistake. They had threatened my family, and now they would pay the price. Not just with their lives, but with everything they had ever built. I would dismantle their empire brick by brick, and when I was done, there would be nothing left but ashes and memory. Within 24 hours, my empire was no longer a passive entity. It was a war machine, its gears grinding into motion. The information from Bruno was a goldmine. He gave me the locations of the Moretti's primary money laundering operations, their hidden armories, and the safe houses of their key lieutenants. I wasn't just going to kill them. That was too quick, too merciful. I was going to dismantle them, piece by piece, until they were nothing but a memory. I was going to make them feel the same fear, the same powerlessness that they had tried to inflict on my family. My first move was to cripple their finances. A well-placed tip to the FBI, anonymously delivered, led to a series of raids on their shell corporations. The Morettis were now bleeding money, and their operations were in disarray. My second move was to target their leadership. One by one, their lieutenants started to disappear. They would be found dead, their bodies left in the most public of places, a clear message to the underworld. The Castellano family was back, and it was furious. The city was in turmoil. The streets buzzed with a tension that you could cut with a knife. The other crime families, the neutral parties, were watching, waiting to see who would emerge victorious. This was the moment that would define the next decade of New York's underworld. I remained in the shadows, a ghost orchestrating a symphony of destruction. I had no time for sentiment. I had no time for grief. I only had time for vengeance. The death of my brother's humanity was a sacrifice I had to make. He had chosen his side, and he had chosen poorly. Amidst the chaos, I found a strange solace in the quiet moments. I started spending more time at the estate, not for the business, but to just be. I'd sit in the garden, watching Leo play, his laughter a tiny, triumphant sound in a world of war. And I'd see Elias, the little boy who had saved us all. Clara was still on the staff, though I had promoted her to a position of far greater importance. She was no longer just a housekeeper. She was now the head of my household staff, a position of immense trust and responsibility. The fear in Elias's eyes had faded, replaced by a quiet curiosity. He no longer hid in the shadows. He was a welcome guest in my home, the little boy who saw the truth that a king could not. He was a reminder that in a world of betrayal and lies, loyalty could be found in the most unexpected of places. He was an innocent, and I had a debt to him that I could never fully repay. But I could protect him. I could make sure that the world he grew up in was one where monsters like the Morettis didn't exist. The war continued on multiple fronts. My men hit their armories, destroying millions of dollars worth of weapons and ammunition. They intercepted their drug shipments, burning the product and killing the couriers. The Morettis were being squeezed from every direction, and they had no idea how to stop it. I received word that Alberto Moretti had called an emergency meeting of his remaining capos. They were scared, desperate, and looking for answers. That was exactly the reaction I wanted. Fear made people careless. Desperation made them stupid. I had a mole inside that meeting, one of Bruno's former associates who had switched sides when he saw which way the wind was blowing. He reported back every word, every tremor in their voices, every panicked glance exchanged across the table. They were falling apart, and they knew it. But I also knew that cornered animals were the most dangerous. Alberto Moretti was not a man who would go quietly into the night. He would fight back, and he would fight dirty. I needed to be ready for whatever he threw at me. That I spent hours in my war room, studying maps and intelligence reports, planning my next move. The final strike was coming, and I wanted it to be perfect. I wanted to end this war in a single, devastating blow that would leave no doubt about who ruled this city. The Morettis had tried to take everything from me. They had used my own brother as their weapon. They had threatened my wife and my son. They had brought a bomb into my home, into my son's birthday party. They had made it personal, and now I would make it permanent. There would be no mercy. There would be no negotiation. There would only be the cold, hard reality of my vengeance. I was Don Castellano, and I would not rest until every last trace of the Moretti family was erased from the earth. The final piece of the puzzle was the Moretti compound, a fortified mansion on the outskirts of the city. It was a fortress, bristling with armed men and state-of-the-art security. A direct assault would be suicide. I needed something else. I needed a Trojan horse. Bruno's information was the key. He knew of a secret tunnel, an old bootlegging passage, that led directly into the mansion's wine cellar. A team of my best men would use it to infiltrate the compound. The night of the assault was a dark and stormy one, the rain hammering against the windows of the estate. I was in my war room, a high-tech bunker beneath the house, surrounded by the glowing screens of monitors. I could see everything. My men moving through the shadows, their movements ghost-like and precise. The plan was simple. Infiltrate, neutralize the security, and take down the leadership.
No merci. No survivors.
This was a war of extinction, and I intended to win. I watched as the first team entered the tunnel. The second team moved into position, ready to launch a diversionary attack on the main gate. I could feel the adrenaline pumping through my veins, the cold, hard satisfaction of a plan coming together. The next few hours were a blur of tense silence punctuated by the crackle of gunfire and the static of the radio. One by one, my teams reported their successes. The security system was down. The guards were neutralized. The compound was breached. And then the final report came in. We have the Don Enzo. The Moretti patriarch is in the main hall. He's waiting for you. My men had done their job. It was my turn that I left the war room and stepped out into the night. The rain was still falling, a cold, cleansing baptism. I walked through the back gate and approached the Moretti mansion, the symbol of my enemy's power. It was my time to reclaim what was mine. The grounds were littered with the bodies of fallen guards, their blood mixing with the rain to form dark rivers on the stone pathways. My men stood at attention as I passed, their faces grim but triumphant. They had done what I asked, and they had done it well. The front door of the mansion hung open, its hinges shattered by the initial breach. I stepped inside, my footsteps echoing in the grand foyer. The walls were lined with paintings that had probably been stolen from museums, the floors covered in Persian rugs that cost more than most people's houses. All of it would soon belong to me. I made my way through the corridors, past the bodies of Moretti soldiers who had tried and failed to defend their master. The air was thick with the smell of cordite and blood. It was the smell of victory. The main hall was at the end of a long, marble-floored hallway. The doors were open, and I could see Alberto Moretti seated in a high-backed chair at the far end of the room. He was alone, surrounded by the remnants of his shattered empire. I walked slowly, deliberately, letting him feel the weight of every step. I wanted him to understand that this was not just an attack. This was judgment. This was the consequence of his arrogance, his greed, his foolish belief that he could touch what was mine and walk away unscathed. He watched me approach, his face a mask of defiance. But I could see the fear in his eyes. It was the fear of a man who knew he had lost everything and who was about to lose the only thing he had left. I stopped a few feet in front of him and looked down at the man who had tried to destroy my family. He was old, tired, and broken. The king of the Moretti Empire had been reduced to a terrified old man in a gilded cage. "Alberto," I said, my voice calm and steady. "We meet at last." The main hall of the Moretti mansion was a grand, ornate space, its walls lined with Renaissance paintings and gilded mirrors. It was a monument to the family's arrogance. And in its center, seated on a gilded throne, was the old man himself, Alberto Moretti. He was surrounded by his remaining soldiers, a pitiful collection of frightened men. He was an old man, his face weathered and cold, his eyes those of a ruthless predator. He didn't flinch as I entered. He didn't show fear. He was a king who knew he was about to be dethroned, but who would go to his grave with his dignity intact. "So, the prodigal son returns," he sneered, his voice raspy. "I thought Marco would have done a better job of finishing you off. I should have known better than to trust a traitor." "A traitor is a traitor, Alberto," I said, my voice echoing in the vast space. "You used one to try and kill me. You thought you could take my empire by turning my own blood against me. But you forgot one thing. No one protects their family like a Castellano." His eyes narrowed. "You're a fool. You're just a gangster with a lucky streak. Your children will be dead by the next full moon. Your wife will be a whore on the streets. I'll make sure of it. Your family is in the ground, Alberto. Your sons, your lieutenants, they are all dust. You have nothing left. You have no empire, no legacy, and no hope. But you do have a choice. You can face me like a man, or you can die like a coward." He laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "You think you've won, you're just a pawn in a much bigger game. This is not about me, Enzo. It's about a new world order. And you're not part of it." But I knew he was bluffing. His world was over. There was no bigger game, no greater power. There was only me. I had his family, his money, his secrets. I had everything. He had nothing. I walked toward him, my footsteps echoing in the silent hall. His guards shifted nervously, but they didn't dare to stop me. I stood before him, a king in a palace of rubble. "Your only regret," I said, my voice a low, cold whisper, "is that you didn't finish the job yourself. But you're a coward, Alberto. You always were. That's why you're going to die alone, in the dark, forgotten by everyone." I saw the flicker of fear in his eyes, the crack in his armor. He was a man who had spent his entire life building a fortress around himself, and now that fortress was crumbling around him. I reached into my coat and pulled out a small, silver pistol, the same one I had carried since I was a young man fighting for my place in this world. I could kill you right now, I said, my finger resting on the trigger. It would be quick. Painless even. But that would be too easy. Too merciful. You don't deserve mercy, Alberto. You deserve to live with what you've lost. I lowered the gun and turned my back on him, a deliberate act of contempt. The message was clear. He was no longer a threat. He was nothing. A ghost in a crumbling palace, surrounded by the ashes of his ambitions. Take him to the basement. I ordered my men. Chain him to the wall. Let him rot in the dark for a while. I'll decide what to do with him later. My men moved forward, grabbing Alberto by the arms and dragging him from his throne. He didn't resist. He knew it was over. He had lost everything, and he was too old and too tired to fight anymore. I watched them take him away, his screams echoing through the hall as they dragged him down the stairs. It was the sound of an empire falling, the sound of a dynasty dying. And I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. The war was over. I had won. The Moretti family was no more. But as I stood in the empty hall, surrounded by the spoils of my victory, I realized that I felt hollow. The vengeance I had craved had not filled the void inside me. It had only made it deeper. I thought of Leo, of his small hand in mine. I thought of Elena, of her unwavering loyalty. I thought of Elias, the little boy who had seen the truth and had the courage to speak it. They were my future now. The past was dead, and I intended to keep it that way. I didn't kill him. Not then. That would have been too merciful. I let him live, but I took everything else. His empire was dismantled, his assets seized, his family scattered to the winds. I erased his name from the map. He was a ghost, a living monument to my vengeance. The aftermath was a strange, quiet peace. I had won the war, but the scars would remain. I was more powerful than ever, but I was also more isolated. The trust one had once given so freely was gone. It had been replaced by a cold, hard cynicism. I had seen the face of betrayal, and it wore the face of my own brother. But there was one bright light in the darkness. Elias and I had the entire estate remodeled. I created a private wing just for Clara and Elias, a sanctuary of safety and peace. I had tutors brought in for him, and I gave him the kind of childhood he deserved, a childhood free from fear, filled with laughter and toys and love. He was no longer the silent, frightened boy who had whispered a warning at a party. He was now a happy, inquisitive child, a constant presence in my life. He and Leo became inseparable, two innocent souls bound by a terrible secret. They were brothers of the heart, and I was their protector. I had learned a profound lesson from a 3-year-old. Loyalty is not about blood. It's about action. It's about the quiet courage of a little boy who saw danger and chose to warn the man who could save him, even when the world was telling him to be quiet. Elias had shown me the kind of strength I had forgotten. He had reminded me that in a world of monsters, hope could be found in the most fragile of packages. He was my reminder that the greatest victories aren't won in battle, but in the hearts of those we protect. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months. The underworld settled into an uneasy peace, the other families wary of crossing the man who had destroyed the Morettis. I was a legend now, a figure of fear and respect. But inside, I was still the man who had almost lost everything. That I visited Marco in his cell beneath the estate. He was a broken shell of the man he had once been, his arrogance stripped away by months of isolation and darkness. He begged for forgiveness, for mercy, for a chance to redeem himself. I listened to his pleas in silence, then turned and walked away. He had made his choice, and he would live with the consequences. Some wounds never heal. Some betrayals cut too deep. But I had learned to live with the scars. I had learned to find joy in the small moments, in the laughter of my son, in the quiet strength of my wife, in the innocent trust of a little boy who had saved us all. Elias was growing up fast. He had started school, a private institution where he could learn and play without fear. He was a bright child, curious and kind, and he brought light into every room he entered. Clara had flourished in her new role, her confidence growing with each passing day. She was no longer just a maid. She was a trusted member of my household, a friend, a confidant. And Leo adored Elias. They were inseparable, two boys from different worlds bound by a shared history. They played together in the gardens, their laughter echoing across the estate. They were the future, the hope that I had almost lost, and I often thought about the night of the party, the moment when Elias had whispered that single word into my ear. It had changed everything. It had saved my family, my empire, my life. And it had reminded me that sometimes the most powerful forces in the world are the ones we least expect. I made a vow that night. I would never let anyone hurt Elias or his mother. I would protect them with my life, just as they had protected mine. They were family now, bound not by blood, but by a bond stronger than any chain. The Morettas were gone, their name erased from the history of the underworld. But I would not make the same mistake they had. I would not let power corrupt me. I would not let fear turn me into a monster. I would be better. I would be worthy of the trust that had been placed in me. And I would never forget the lesson that a 3-year-old boy had taught me, that courage comes in all sizes, and that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is speak the truth when everyone else is silent. A year passed. The winds of change swept through the city. The underworld was quiet, a testament to my newfound power. I was no longer just a dawn. I was a legend, a force of nature. The Morettas were forgotten, a cautionary tale whispered in the shadows. My empire was stronger than ever, a fortress of solitude and strength. I sat in my office, the new one, a space of clean lines and quiet power. I was going over the day's reports, a stack of documents that detailed the various businesses I now controlled. It was a monotonous task, but a necessary one. Power required maintenance. A soft knock on the door broke my concentration. "Come in." I called out, the door opened, and a familiar, shy face peered in. It was Elias. He had grown, his face no longer the pale, frightened mask of a toddler. He now had the sturdy build of a child at play, and his eyes held the spark of intelligence and mischief. He was holding a small, clumsily drawn picture. "Don Enzo," he said, his voice a little more confident. "I made this for you." I took the picture from him. It was a drawing of a tall, dark figure, me, standing in front of a house, with a small, smiling stick-figure boy beside him. And at the bottom, in his wobbly, childlike scrawl, were the words, "My hero." A lump formed in my throat. The cold, hard fortress of my heart cracked, just a little. I had been a monster, a king of a world of shadows. I had killed, plotted, and betrayed. I had survived through cunning and ruthlessness. And yet, the most genuine thing in my life was the love of a child who had seen the truth in a room full of liars. "Thank you, little one," I whispered, my voice hoarse with emotion. I pulled him into a hug, a gesture I would never have allowed myself before. He was my redemption, a walking, talking, laughing reminder that even in the darkest of souls, there is still room for light. My son Leo ran into the room, his toy car in hand, his face lit with a broad smile. "Can Elias stay for dinner, Daddy?" he asked. I looked from my son to the little boy who had saved him. "Of course," I said. From now on, Elias is always welcome at the Castellano table. The past was a nightmare, a story of betrayal and bloodshed. The present was a quiet peace, a fragile thing I intended to protect. And the future was about a little boy's simple drawing and a promise I intended to keep. In the shadows of the New York underworld, a king had found a new dawn, and its name was Elias. I spent that evening watching the two boys play in the garden, their laughter floating up through the open windows. Elena stood beside me, her hand in mine, her head resting on my shoulder. We were a family, forged in fire and tempered by loss. And we were stronger for it. Clara joined us for dinner that night, her usual reserve replaced by a quiet confidence. She had come so far from the frightened woman who had begged for her son's safety in a dark hallway. She was a pillar now, a foundation upon which I could build my future. I raised my glass in a toast. "To family," I said, my voice steady. "To loyalty." and to the brave little boy who reminded us all what truly matters. The glasses clinked. The boys giggled. And for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. The war was over. The empire was secure. And I had found something I never expected to find in the blood-soaked world I inhabited: redemption. It came in the form of a small, shy boy who had seen the darkness and chosen to shine a light. It came in the form of a quiet maid who had risked everything for her child. It came in the form of a wife who had stood by me through the worst of storms. I had been given a second chance. A chance to be better, to be more than just a king of shadows. A chance to be a father, a husband, a protector. And I intended to seize it with both hands. The city below me glimmered in the darkness, a sea of lights that stretched to the horizon. It was mine to command, mine to protect. But the greatest treasure I possessed was not the empire I had built. It was the family I had found along the way. Elias looked up at me from across the table, his eyes shining with the simple joy of a child who felt safe and loved. He smiled, and I smiled back. The king and the boy, bound together by a whisper and a promise. And in that moment, I knew that the future was bright. The years rolled on, gentle and forgiving in a way I had never expected. Leo and Elias grew up side by side, their laughter a permanent fixture in the halls of the Castellano estate. They were not brothers by blood, but something far more unbreakable. They were brothers by choice, by survival, by the quiet bond forged in the shadow of a whispered warning that had saved an empire. I watched them from my study window as they raced across the lawn, their shouts echoing off the old stone walls. Leo was faster, but Elias was clever, always finding the shortcut, the hidden path. They balanced each other, two halves of a whole. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that they would carry this legacy forward together. Clara had become more than a trusted confidant. She was family, in every way that mattered. I had given her a seat at my table, a voice in my councils, and she had proven herself worthy of every ounce of trust one placed in her. She had the quiet strength of a woman who had stared into the abyss and refused to blink. The underworld had changed too. The other families had learned their lesson. They did not cross the Castellano name. They did not test the boundaries of my patience. They knew the story, the legend, of the Dawn who had destroyed the Moretus and built a dynasty from their ashes. They knew, too, of the little boy who had saved him, the whisper that had changed everything. I had made peace with the darkness I carried. It would always be a part of me, a shadow that walked beside me, a reminder of the price I had paid for my power. But I had learned to let the light in. I had learned to trust, to love, to hope. And it was all because of a child who had seen the truth and had the courage to speak it on a quiet evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of amber and gold. I stood on the balcony overlooking my kingdom. Leo and Elias were playing chess in the library, their voices carrying up to me in the warm night air. Elena was beside me, her hand in mine, her presence a steady anchor. "You did well," she said softly. "You made this world safe for them." I shook my head. I didn't do it alone. There were others who made it possible. Others who believed in me when I had forgotten how to believe in myself. She squeezed my hand. "They believed in you because you were worthy of it. You always were. You just needed to remember." In the distance, I heard Elias's laughter, bright and unburdened. It was the sound of hope, of a future that I had almost lost but had somehow found again. I smiled, a genuine smile that reached the corners of my eyes. The king of the underworld had found his peace. And it was not in power, wealth, or vengeance. It was in a small, shy boy who had looked into a room full of monsters and seen the truth. It was in a whisper, and it was in the promise of a new dawn.